Okay, so today we're going to be continuing my series on the truth about One Punch Man, and in this one we're going to be talking about Genos and Drive Knight, and how one based these characters off of Egyptian gods, and how their mythology can show us the truth about them, as well as where their story could be headed. Also, please check out the playlist I have on this series, as those videos can help you get better acquainted with what I'm going to be talking about in this video. I'll have the link in the description. Okay, so in the first part of this video, I want to go over the mythology aspects of Genos and Drive Knight, and in the second part, I'm going to go in depth into why Drive Knight has actually been the mad cyborg this whole time. So Genos and Drive Knight are based off of Set and Horus, and their storyline in One Punch Man is based off of the contendings of Set and Horus, which is one of the key stories in the myth of Osiris, and if you've been following my videos so far, you'll know that the myth of Osiris is a big element of One Punch Man. So let's start with Genos and Set. Set is the god of deserts, storms, disorder, violence, and foreigners in ancient Egyptian religion. Set had a positive role where he accompanies Ra on his bark to repel Apep, the serpent of chaos. Now, as I've established before, Saitama is Ra, so this is why he has his relationship with Genos. It's the same as Ra and Set, as Set is known as the protector of Ra. Now, as for Apep, I've also said this before, he is Orochi. I want to talk about Apep and Isis, who Psychos is based off of, in another video. Real quick, let's just go into some Set, Ra, and Apep lore. Ra was assisted by a number of defenders who traveled with him, including Set. This is Saitama, along with the S-Class heroes in Genos. Apep's movements were thought to cause earthquakes, and when Saitama is fighting Orochi, it causes earthquakes. And Apep's battles with Set may have been meant to explain the origin of thunderstorms. When Genos is battling Cyrochi, the name of the attack he uses is called Piercing Lightning Cannon. And when Genos and Cyrochi's beams collided, it creates a storm-like explosion, producing lightning. Now, in the original myth of Osiris, Set is the brother of Osiris, who in One Punch Man is God, and he betrays Osiris, leading to his dismemberment. But as I've stated before, one is not directly adapting the source material here. He is only using bits and pieces of the myth and adapting it as he sees fit, such as many mangakas do with their own series. One is more so just taking the Set versus Horus rivalry aspect, more so than just Egyptian gods and their literal family ties. As we've established before, he's more so going off of the lore of Osiris having many conspirators who came together, put him into a box, and then cut it up, threw it into the Nile. But speaking of Horus, let's go into him because he represents Drive Knight. So Horus is one of the most significant ancient Egyptian deities who served many functions, most notably the god of kingship and the sky. Different forms of Horus are recorded in history, and these are treated as distinct gods by Egyptologists. These various forms may possibly be different manifestations of the same multi-layered deity. This is, of course, why Drive Knight has many forms that we've seen throughout the series. The most commonly encountered family relationship describes Horus as the son of Isis and Osiris, and he plays a key role in the Osiris myth as Osiris's heir and the rival to Set. So as we've gone over, Isis is Psychos and Osiris is God. So I think him being referred to as Osiris' son means that Drive Knight is a byproduct of God. Not so much that he was literally created by him, but he is evil because of his influence. So if we go back to Genos' exposition on the mad cyborg in chapter 7, he says one day a crazy cyborg went out of control and attacked our town. A runaway cyborg, I suppose a failure in his body modification, generated an irregularity in his brain. Think that when Drive Knight was being made into a cyborg, he was visited by God in a similar manner to Psychos when she merged with Orochi, or when God tried to trick Tatsumaki by disguising himself as Blast. It's also implied he did the same thing to a Maya Mask in the past. It was God and Drive Knight's willingness to accept his influence that allowed him to become the mad cyborg. This also further gives God one of his greatest disciples and paths to achieving his goal. With Psychos, he influenced her to create the Monster Association and take over the world with monsters, and also by turning more people into them. But with Drive Knight, he influenced him to make the organization and take over the world with machines and turn people into cyborgs. But I'll go more into all the organization stuff later on. But let's get back to the mythology. The Eye of Horus is an ancient Egyptian symbol of protection and royal power from deities. in this case from Horus or Ra. The symbol is seen on images of Horus's mother Isis and on other deities associated with her. So the Eye of Horus is an extremely important aspect of One Punch Man, just like we talked about before with the Eye of Ra. This is why Drive Knight has a singular eye. It represents the Eye of Horus. As it is also mentioned, the symbol is seen on images of Isis. This is represented when Psychos acted as Giro Giro. We'll also come to find out that the Eye of Horus is also represented as Satellite's abilities to observe, as well as the organization's multiple technologies, but we'll talk about that later too. So now let's go into the Set and Horus rivalry. Now this story as a whole is very tricky and problematic. There's a large portion of it that involves assault of a kind that I can't really talk about on YouTube, but I suppose one could be navigating that portion of the story with Drive Knight and Genos fusing together that one time when they fought against Orochi. But basically throughout the story, Horus and Set have various competitions to see who will be king. Horus beats Set each time. The beginning of the story is sort of a trial when both Set and Horus plead their cases and the deities of the Ennead state their opinions. One of these competitions is a race, and we actually see, or should I say hear, one do this in the Maji Drama CD Volume 3, where in a parallel universe the S-Class heroes are high school students participating in a relay race, and it eventually comes to Genos racing against Drive Knight, which leads to Drive Knight blowing Genos up with missiles. And the race is pretty much the most tame thing that Set and Horus do, or that I could talk about on YouTube. Feel free to look up the contendings of Set and Horus yourself if you want to read some pretty wild stuff. But like I said, one is more so adapting the rivalry of these two in general. Metal Knight is also a part of the contendings of Set and Horus, such as he is a major part of the Genos and Drive Knight story. But I need a full video dedicated to him, so I'll discuss Metal Knight and his Egyptian counterpart as well as his role in the next video. Anyway, later in the story, Set fights with Horus, and after several long battles, Horus finally wins and becomes king. So does this mean that Drive Knight is going to kill Genos and take over the world? I don't know one would necessarily go down that path entirely, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is a portion of the story where it appears that Drive Knight has won, only for Genos to come back and take him out. Okay, so now we've established all the mythology around these two. So now I want to go into the One Punch Man story itself and show the evidence supporting Drive Knight being the Mad Cyborg, and what his and the organization's ultimate goal is. But first, let's talk about today's sponsor, and that's Magic Spoon. So I haven't really been too big on cereal since like I was a kid, you know, because it's like empty calories. But Magic Spoon is quite the opposite of that. And that's why I'm really happy that they came into my life, because Magic Spoon has 0 grams of sugar, 5 net carbs, and 13 to 14 grams of protein, which is just amazing. Also, somehow it's grain-free, soy-free, and gluten-free, which is nice too. You know, we can't make an elaborate breakfast all the time, and sometimes we gotta get out quickly. So this is a nice breakfast for on the go when you need to get your macros in for the morning. My favorite so far is their fruity kind. And you're probably thinking like, oh, well, it doesn't taste good because it's like diet food. No. I don't know how they did it, but this tastes just as good, if not better, than traditional cereal. And I haven't heard anyone else say this in their own Magic Spoon ads, but it has like this nice mouthfeel to it and this great texture. So guys, click the link in the description and you can get your very own variety pack today. You can also use code BIGZ for $5 off of your order, or you can just go to magicspoon.com/BigZ. Also, Magic Spoon is so confident in their product that they have a 100% happiness guarantee. Meaning that if you don't like this for some reason, they'll just refund your money. So again, please click the link in the description and don't forget to use code BIGZ for $5 off, or go to magicspoon.com/BigZ for $5 off your order. Thanks guys. So this all starts in the first meeting between Genos and Drive Knight in chapter 34, when Drive Knight tells him Metal Knight is your enemy. Now, like many of you, at first I assumed Drive Knight was telling the truth. I mean, why shouldn't we believe him? Especially this early on in the series, when our only real glimpse of Metal Knight was him being suspicious in his lukewarm attempt to stop the meteor. However, as we'll learn, this is what Drive Knight does. He gaslights and manipulates, and his main target of blame is Metal Knight, Dr. Bufoy. Likely because Bufoy is the one who created Drive Knight, but we'll get into that later. Now let's fast forward to chapter 66, when Drive Knight shows shows up again. He comes across some Monster Association fodder and interrogates one of them for information about the Monster Association. Going to chapter 77, we'll find out that Drive Knight relayed this information he received from the monster to the Hero Association, such as their group name and their base location in Z City. Drive Knight did this for two reasons. First of all, for his own personal gain, of course, by collecting data on the Monster Association, but also staying in the good graces of the Hero Association, because taking control of them is one of his ultimate goals. This also goes back to the Egyptian mythology of Heliopolis. We talked about this in the previous video. It's originally a place of worship for Ra, Saitama, but it later becomes a place of worship for Horus, Drive Knight. Cut to chapter 83, and Sekengar tells the S-Class heroes that Drive Knight insisted on running recon, ignored their warnings, and plunged into the ghost town by himself, and that last night the signal from his transmitter ceased, and that it would later appear that Drive Knight has fallen. In the following chapter 84, we see a robot named Machine God G5 randomly show up to the Monster Association, saying that he spotted Narinki's private squad on his way and captured them for Giro Giro. He also says that the organization dispatched him to assist with the Monster Association. Then Psychos asks him how he found their hideout, and if she can speak with his maker. G5 responds in silence. So in my opinion, Drive Knight is the one who gave him the location of the base, and is also his maker. As we just went over, he obtained this information himself, and in the previous chapter, Drive Knight randomly goes silent. I don't think these two events are a coincidence, especially since G5 goes silent when he's asked how he obtained their location. Also, he has a singular eye, just like Drive Knight, which goes back to the eye of Horus. Whenever we see a singular eye in the series, it is one telling us that it's likely a bad guy. This also means that Drive Knight is likely the leader of the organization. Going further to chapter 87, we see G5 collecting the broken Metal Knight robot head. Previously, when Metal Knight was battling Elder Centipede, he latched onto him, following him into the Monster Association, where he's eventually wrecked by Orochi. Royal Ripper asks G5 what he's doing with it, and he responds that he claimed it for his own personal interest, and that he plans to disassemble it, examine it, and that it's a valuable sample. Now we see the core reason of why Drive Knight sent G5 to the Monster Association. It was to retrieve Metal Knight's drone. Collecting data on the monsters was only secondary. Later in chapter 95, we see G5 successfully retrieved and compiled all the pieces of the broken Metal Knight drone, which is discovered by Child Emperor. Child Emperor is able to access the drone's data, meaning that G5 surely has done the same, which means the organization now has crucial data from Metal Knight, which will lead to future elements of the story that we'll discuss later. Now let's fast forward to chapter 117, where Drive Knight successfully defeats Neon. He begins to talk to Sekengar, who asks him what he's been doing since he's been radio silent for 2 days. Drive Knight says that he was gathering information on the enemy, and that he was able to gather the names, characteristics, and fighting styles of the members of the Monster Association who are demon and dragon level. He implies he gained this information by further torturing monsters, but we never see him do any of this, so I believe that he gained this information from G5, who we saw was actually inside of the Monster Association. He then tells Sekengar that he wanted to send the Hero Association this information, but he didn't want to run the risk of it being intercepted by a traitor. He then asks Sekengar how strong the Hero's forces are at the moment, realizing that the strike team is busy with the Monster Association raid, and that Garo had taken down many heroes already. He then says that the Hero Association doesn't have many strong heroes for addressing a further crisis, and Sekengar tells him that if an attack were to happen, then Metal Knight's defense system would activate. And Drive Knight says, and yet he made it. The moment you believed him, the battle was half over. He then goes on to tell Sekengar that Metal Knight is the traitor, and claims the monsters have hacked the robot's information and gained command of his weapons. He also claims that the passcodes for Bufoy's missiles and explosives may be in the monsters' hands as well. He also claims that he gave this information to the monsters on purpose, as he plans to give weapons to the monsters, because he's been waiting for a moment when the Hero Association is weak, and he suspects that he wants to increase his personal military strength in order to take over the world. This is all clearly nonsense, since we literally never see any of this remotely transpire. Obviously, Bufoy didn't plan this, and obviously Psychos and the Monster Association didn't care about the drone at all. The only one who showed interest in it was G5, who is Drive Knight's pawn.
In Chapter 100, we do see Zombie Man defeat some robots that appear to be a hybrid of monster and Metal Knight technology. Pretty evident that G5 was the one who created these, obviously to further incriminate Metal Knight, but also increasing his good graces with the Monster Association.
This is further gaslighting from Drive Knight, as he is literally projecting his own machinations onto Metal Knight here. This is the true goal of the organization. Sekindar then wisely says, no wait, we mustn't jump to conclusions. After all, you don't have proof. Drive Knight is silent because he's obviously lying. He then tries to deflect the conversation and asks him if the headquarters were to fall under attack, would Blast come to defend it? Sekindar says he doubts it since he's practically retired. Then Sekindar attempts to contact the HQ, telling them to go on high alert, until conveniently G5 appears and shoots the phone and his hand off. This pretty much proves the connection here, and that Drive Knight has been probing Sekindar for information, as he felt this may have been a prime opportunity for the organization to make their attack on the Hero Association. Sekindar then asks Drive Knight to defeat G5, but he says his equipment is barely operable as he was using it continuously for days, and his battle with Neon has depleted his power for combat. While this is true, because we see him replenish his energy in Chapter 133, I believe this is a misdirect and just an excuse for him to not take out his own pawn. As G5 is about to attack Sekindar, Genos shows up at the last second and destroys him, leading us back to the Set and Horus rivalry, as Genos thwarts Drive Knight's plans, at least for now, and also in the mythology, Set eventually takes one of Horus's eyes. As we've established, G5, being one of Drive Knight's pawns, is also one of his eyes. In the following Chapter 118, Drive Knight tells Genos that he's going to study Neon's anatomy for creating a biomatic weapon. This is important because it will be revealed as one of the organization's key strategies later on. Going forward to Chapter 132, we see Drive Knight show up again during the battle against Orochi. He immediately makes it clear that his only intention is to obtain a sample of Orochi. Later in the fight, he convinces Genos to combine with him so he can use the power from his core. After they work together fighting off Orochi, he successfully obtains a piece of Orochi and then literally pieces out of there, leaving Genos to overheat and eventually die if Fubuki didn't save him. This further shows the evil, self-serving side of Drive Knight, but the important thing here is him obtaining a piece of Orochi. This goes back to Drive Knight being a product of God, Horus being the son of Osiris. I believe Drive Knight will eventually bring Orochi back as a cyborg, and when he does this, he will also be bringing God back to the earth. It was revealed in Chapter 115 that there is a sacrificial altar beneath the Monster Association with a mural depicting that an Orochi-like being will eventually be born, and when he is placed on the altar, he will resurrect God to the earth. But as we saw, Orochi was killed by Tatsumaki, and in the process burying the altar. This is where Drive Knight's resurrected Orochi cyborg comes into play. Just like how the original Orochi instinctually went to the core of the earth in search of energy to absorb, but in turn found the altar, the cyborg Orochi will likely do the same or something like that, and will eventually be placed on the altar, resurrecting God. This is why Drive Knight was originally interested in collecting the Orochi sample in the first place. It was God's influence the whole time. However, I don't think Drive Knight willingly knows that he is serving God, probably. He's more so subconsciously being manipulated. This is also why Drive Knight's box looks similar to the God cubes. It's not a coincidence, the same way it's not a coincidence the Ninja Village and the Esper testing facilities are cubes. So now at this point, we're going to be leaving the manga's continuity and going into the webcomic. What we're going over is going to be happening much later in the story, and while the webcomic has a different continuity than the manga, the arcs and future arcs will essentially be the same. Going to Chapter 125, we find out that a rival hero organization has emerged, named the Neo Heroes, and within their ranks, to assure their team works properly, they've hired 2 security guards in charge of cracking down on rule violators. Their names are Eramin and Destro. It's then revealed that they are both 94 and 95% cyborg. cyborgs. I'll cut to the chase with these two because I believe they are the original organization cyborgs we're introduced to in chapter 14, who attempt to kill Hammerhead, the brain robot, and the gray fox looking robot, but in disguise. I believe this means the organization has fully infiltrated the Neo-Heroes and is secretly pulling a lot of its strings. Going further to chapter 131, Aramin and Destro reveal to Metalbat that they've turned seemingly killed members of the Neo-Heroes into cyborgs through a process of cyborgification, saying that if the brain is safe, it can be restored by taking full advantage of the cyber tech that scientists of the Neo-Heroes have been studying for several years. In my opinion, this is the process that gave birth to Drive Knight, going back to the Mad Cyborg lore of his body modification causing an irregularity in his brain. Later, Aramin and Destro forcibly try to turn Metalbat into a cyborg, but ultimately fail when the Neo-Heroes leader Fuzzy shows up and stops them. This shows their true evil intentions. We also see all the Neo-Heroes wearing battle suits. Child Emperor says that unlike regular armor, it reads the wearer's nerves and uses electrical signals to react with artificial muscles and sync, and that he saw plans for something like them in Metal Knight's development room. He then suspects that Metal Knight is involved and says that if it's true, then he effectively has both of the association's military mights in his grasp. This is of course a further misdirect. As we know by now, Drive Knight is the true perpetrator here. We further see One's misdirect in chapter 130 when he shows the Hero Association executives reviewing the S-Class heroes and are highly suspicious of Metal Knight, and at the same time they praise Drive Knight, saying that he is the one hero that they can openly rely on. As I said before, this was his goal, to manipulate the Hero Association with disinformation while also sullying Metal Knight while making himself out to be a saint. So how did Drive Knight, along with the organization, obtain Metal Knight's data in order to produce these suits? We saw in the manga's continuity that G5 salvaged the pieces of Metal Knight's drone in the Monster Association and likely siphoned its data similar to how we saw Child Emperor did, but those events don't happen in the webcomics continuity. However, we could see a point where it does happen in the webcomic, but it's much more subtle. In chapter 96, when Saitama returns to the Hero Association, picking up miniature Overgrown Rover and Black S, Metal Knight's automated defense system detects them and begins to attack. But Saitama is none the wiser of what's actually happening here and destroys all the robots, thinking that they're like attacking him. Cut to chapter 97 when we learn that Metal Knight picked up the security footage of these events in order to figure out what destroyed his defense robots. And when we see him reviewing the footage, on the screen to the left, we can see the brain robot from the organization. This brain robot, who I also suspect to be Aramin in disguise, showed up to the Hero Association after Saitama destroyed Metal Knight's defense robots and salvaged the broken pieces and siphoned its data, similar to how G5 did in the Monster Association in the manga. Pretty sure this is how the organization obtained the information in order to make the power suits that the Neo-Heroes currently wear. Now, I believe these suits serve two purposes. First, they collect data from the user's battles. This data is then retrieved by the organization in order to strengthen their forces. It goes back to when we originally were introduced to the organization, when they allowed him and the Paradisers to steal their battle suits in order to get their battle data. The second purpose of the suits is to eventually take control of the users and force them to become soldiers of the organization when they decide to initiate their ultimate plan. In chapter 133, when we see Suiryu fighting Garo, his suit momentarily takes over and Suiryu says, "It's overdoing it, I can't stop my attacks." This is foreshadowing for what is to eventually come. It goes back to what I said about God having two paths to eventually controlling humanity. One side through monsterization and one side through technology. Psychos and Drive Knight, Isis and Horus. Two sides of the same coin for God, Osiris. That's not all though. Going back to chapter 130, Child Emperor finds a chip implanted in the head of a dragon level eel monster that was defeated by Blue. Then in chapter 135, Child Emperor finds another chip in a defeated monster and also discovers that artificial muscles were built into its body, which inflated its power several times over. He considers these cyborg monsters. This is clearly the organization manipulating these monsters and releasing them into the public so that the Neo-Heroes wearing their battle suits can fight them in order to collect better data. Another aspect of the organization further goes into the Eye of Horus, which is the further view of Drive Knight. In Chapter 132, we see that the Neo Heroes have a satellite tracking system, and in Chapter 137, we find out that Blue wears mechanical contacts supplied to him. These contacts are extremely important, but I'll discuss their significance in a future video. Now we come to Drive Knight finally showing up in Chapter 139, and once again, Genos is there as well. After fighting off zoo monsters together, Genos asks Drive Knight what he knows about Metal Knight, and this time we get the webcomic version of Drive Knight's manipulative gaslighting, as well as projecting of his machinations onto Metal Knight. He tells Genos that he told him that Metal Knight was his enemy to keep him safe from him, and that he robs others of military tech. He further says that your incineration cannons and reinforced muscle fibers and artificial nerves and the energy core you have, I thought it would be a problem if he obtained them. Now we see the reason why Drive Knight is interested in Genos and has been trying to manipulate him this whole time. He's interested in not only siphoning his technology made by Dr. Cruceno, but he also wants to turn him into a future soldier for the organization. Drive Knight then goes on to say that Metal Knight is evil, and that he masked himself as a hero with a sense of justice and joined the Hero Association, but only to hijack their defense system with his own, and then claims that Metal Knight's monster containment facility is to brainwash, remodel them, and clone them into soldiers, turning them into bioweapons that obey his orders. This lines up with not only Child Emperor's discoveries, but also the same exact intentions that Drive Knight had for Neon in the manga. Drive Knight then goes on to say what I believe is a double entendre from one here, when he says that Metal Knight contacts people with dangerous ideas and grants them the power to realize those ideas by lending them his scientific power, then lets them go on a rampage, turning them into useful pawns. He throws societies into chaos and keeps wearing out security organizations such as the Hero Association and police, promoting the decline of national strength. He's trying to rule the world at the right moment when mankind's resistance is weakened. This is not only Drive Knight and the organization's methods, considering that they likely reached out to Fuzzy, the leader of the Neo Heroes, this way.
This also describes what happened with the Paradisers.
But as we've seen, this is exactly how God himself works. The word pawn here is interesting as well. Drive Knight refers to his base form as pawn, and we know that Drive Knight's forms are based on shogi, but I also believe this has a double meaning, referring to Drive Knight as a pawn of God. He also claims he hasn't shared his suspicions of Bafoy with the Hero Association because he fears he has collaborators among the top executives. He says he's telling Genos all of this because he believes they have a mutual enemy and mutual goals. Then Drive Knight drops the bomb and says that his village was also destroyed by the Mad Cyborg, the same who destroyed Genos' town and family. He claims that the Mad Cyborg is one of many autonomous weapons of destructions brought into the world from Bafoy's countless weapon experiments. Whether it be cyborgs or AI-controlled robots, he has spawned countless murderous machines into the world, and that by exterminating these machines and collecting samples, Drive Knight has continuously modified and strengthened his body. This right here is Drive Knight subtly exposing himself, since earlier he claimed Bafoy was the one who steals others' tech to strengthen his military might. This also falls in line with the behavior we've seen of the organization. In this panel, we also see Drive Knight's weapon box, which, as I said before, resembles the God Cube, which is not a coincidence. He goes on to say that the Mad Cyborg ceased showing up in the past few years because Bafoy is likely preserving it as a trump card, as it's too valuable to deploy needlessly and risk damage, and is probably being kept idle within Bafoy's weapon storage. Again, this is a misdirect from one, and more lies from Drive Knight. Considering that Drive Knight himself is the Mad Cyborg, that is the reason why he hasn't shown up in years. Also, in this panel, we see the back of the Mad Cyborg, which in my opinion looks like a stripped down version of Drive Knight, which was probably purposely conveyed this way by one. So this likely means that Metal Knight, aka Dr. Bafoy, accidentally created the Mad Cyborg. Now we could further speculate about who Drive Knight was originally. Possible that he was Bafoy's son, and maybe Bafoy was trying to save him and converted him into a cyborg, or used his own son as a test subject. And then it goes back to what we said earlier about how God intervened during this process and caused his brain irregularity, transforming him into the Mad Cyborg, who just went on a rampage and destroyed Genos' town. And of course, Metal Knight didn't want this. And this is also probably why Drive Knight knows so much about about Bafoy and why he has such a huge vendetta against him in the first place. But anyway, Drive Knight further says that Metal Knight has already made his move by using strengthened monsters, causing chaos and distress. He'll use his full arsenal to deal a final blow to an already shattered world. His army of robots will attack, and the mad cyborg will undoubtedly also appear. Then he asks Genos to join him and help attack Metal Knight before that happens. Genos then says that he needs time to think about it and consult with the people that he trusts. Afterwards, Drive Knight tells Genos his real name is Zero. I believe this refers to his placement in the organization. In the webcomic, the organization robots are referred to as machine gods, but in the manga, they go by numbers, as we've seen with G4 and G5. I believe Zero means Drive Knight is the original organization member, probably G0. Later, Genos relays the information that Drive Knight gave him to Saitama and Dr. Kuseno, but later that night, 3 robots show up and kill Dr. Kuseno. These robots are referred to as machine gods, just like the previous robots that we've seen from the organization. I believe that Drive Knight sent these gods to kill Kuseno to further frame Metal Knight and give Genos more motivation to join his side in fighting against Bafoy, but also stealing Kuseno's data, especially the data collected on Saitama, but we'll discuss that in another video. Then at the end of chapter 141, we see a legion of what appear to be Metal Knight-esque drones attacking a city. This goes back to the plans that Drive Knight revealed earlier about Metal Knight allegedly having an army of robots attack. This is Drive Knight's plan coming full circle and having the organization take over, while further falsely incriminating Metal Knight. And that's actually where the webcomic leaves off. It hasn't been updated for like over 9 months, so I wish I could tell you more about what's going on, but unfortunately that's all we have for now. But anyway, all of this is why Drive Knight has been the mad cyborg hiding in plain sight this whole time. And you may also be thinking, well, you talked a lot about Drive Knight being evil, but you haven't really cleared Metal Knight. And that's partly true, but that's because in my next video, I'm going to be talking all about Metal Knight, why he's innocent, as well as his ties to Egyptian mythology and why it possibly tells us how Genos versus Drive Knight will ultimately play out. So look forward to that one. But anyway guys, that's it for this one. I'm starting to lose my voice. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a like. Also, please share it. Do people still share videos? Well, if you do, just share this one because I think it's worthy of that. And also, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe and have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.